Hello and welcome to the Indy Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Leslie Lefebvre. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, Maddie, it's great to see you again.
It is great seeing you too. Mark is my first three-peat guest. He joined me in episode 14 to talk about our co-authored book, Taking the Short Tack, Creating Income and Connecting with Readers Using Short Fiction. And then he came back in episode 20 to talk about one of his books, Working with Libraries and Bookstores. I recommend all my episodes, but that's a very good episode, especially for indie authors. And just to give a little bit of background in case anyone has forgotten about Mark from those earlier episodes, Mark Leslie Lefebvre is an author, professional speaker, and bookseller with more than a quarter century of experience in writing, publishing, and bookselling. Mark started writing when he was 13 years old and was drawn to bookselling and has remained in the industry since 1992, wearing many different hats. Among other things, he was the founder of the Kobo Writing Life author platform and is currently the director of business development for Draft to Digital. He is a prolific author of both fiction and nonfiction, and he is also the host of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. So as soon as you've listened to your weekly shot of the indie author, I recommend you go right over to Stark Reflections and listen to what Mark has to say. I asked Mark to come back to the podcast to talk about Wide for the Win. And we're going to talk about, I'll say Wide for the Win with lowercase w's first, and then Wide for the Win with uppercase w's in a little bit. And I'm going to pose the conversation that we're going to be focusing on ebooks, because I think if we cast it wider than ebooks, we would be here for hours. But of course, if the conversation takes us beyond ebooks, that's fine. So Mark, let's just start out so everyone has an equal playing field about what do we mean by wide for the win? Why is that a motto that you prescribe
Well,
to?
for one, because of alliteration, you got to have alliteration. But
Yeah.
the big argument or the big debate or the big divisive thing in the indie author community is often being exclusive to Amazon in the KDP Select program, which a lot of indie authors call the KU, just being in KU, because it gets you into Kindle Unlimited for page reads. Or publishing wide, which means not being exclusive to Amazon for that 90-day tour of duty every time that auto renews if you don't uncheck the box. And sometimes you uncheck the box, and I swear sometimes there's some gremlins in the system that go back and check it, because there were some titles I was trying desperately to get out of it, and I'll explain why I often have stuff in Kindle Unlimited. But the debate between exclusive to Amazon versus publishing to all the other retailers. Now, I do have to express a caveat that my version of wide goes beyond capital wide. It goes to all uppercase wide, way beyond, as we co-wrote together in short fiction. In my mind, wide is far greater than just this world's biggest river versus other streams of water, but there's other lakes and ponds and oceans that we don't even know about that are through traditional publishing and other new technologies. So my wide goes way beyond just ebooks, but we're going to focus on ebooks. So the idea is exclusive ebooks to Amazon or going to the other major retailers. And those major retailers are probably, in terms of the value that they bring authors, in terms of the breadth, maybe, is Apple is probably number one. In international markets, I would say Kobo would probably be number two, not necessarily known at all in the States. You got Nook, which is often number two in the States. And then Google Play, which has been making some incredible strides, especially in the last 9 to 12 months, which I'd been, desperately praying for.
Yeah, I just want to mention that episode 61, Brian Rathbone, who I know came on to talk about Google Play. So if
And that
anyone
was
is
a
interested in
great
Google Play.
episode. And Brian is amazing, because I think he's a perfect example for people who go back, if you haven't listened to that episode of the Indie Author podcast, because Brian demonstrates something that I think is critical that a lot of authors neglect, is publishing wide isn't just putting your books in the other catalogs, but it's actually paying attention to, attending to, and understanding how they're different, how they're unique, and where their benefits are. And Brian's a great example of somebody who's focused on that and actually made Google a significant player for him. It's not, oh, Google is 10% of my annual sales or whatever. He has them as a major percentage. I'm trying to remember, what were the percentages that he was looking at?
I can't remember if we mentioned percentages of sales in that episode, but we did talk about the fact that a focus on Apple platforms was short-sighted if you're going after an international market, because although the iPhone market is strong in the US and the UK, it's not as strong in other parts of the world, which are more Android focused. So
Right.
Google Play is a mechanism of getting into those other markets.
And that being said, Google Play has been absent from the game. Sarah Dickman, who's been in the book industry for a long time, has joined the Google Books team. So many other people who are on the Google Play team, who I've heard at conferences even over the last year and a bit, are amazing and are doing an amazing job. So I think this team has taken Google Play to be parallel to the reach that Apple has. Because Apple had that dominance, and Kobo did in some ways, but just not as big as Apple in a lot of places. But Google, as you said, had the dominance with Android. But now the platform where they're selling books, they're actually leveraging it in the way that they should have been all along, which really makes them a contender, I guess, for the number 2 spot when you think about the overall platforms, right? Like obviously Amazon's the world's biggest bookstore, so you can't ignore them. But I think that authors spend way too much time with their head up Amazon's backside. And that's a combination of metaphors. One is the brown noser, like they're kissing their butt, and the other one is the head in the sand. and honestly, I'm infuriated that authors still to this day still don't get it. They think they get it, or they partially get it. And it drives me nuts because it's almost like that little bit of knowledge is dangerous. So if you know nothing about something, that's one thing, but if a little bit, it's just a little bit too much in order to not be useful. And I actually find it really frustrating that it used to be, oh, I just publish my books everywhere, and then the retailers will take care of it. But now I'm going to go focus on Amazon ads. And it's not all that different. Most authors are still just going, oh, I'm going to put my stuff up there. What are they going to do to help sell me? And that attitude just drives me nuts.
So this is an interesting perspective, because I think that there are two flavors of exclusive, or let's say there are two flavors of non-wide. One is somebody making an intentional decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm going to go to KU. And then there's the de facto non-wide that you're talking about, which is where people aren't paying any attention to any platform other than Amazon. So let's talk for a moment about the intentional decision to go to KU, and what are arguments when you're talking to authors, especially if they're putting up their first book. What are you hearing people say if they think they're going to KU, and then what do you think about those?
And this is a tough one too, because when you're first starting out, it's hard to learn everything. So why not pick the world's biggest bookstore and publish your books there? Makes sense.
Yep.
Because if you only have time to learn one, learn the biggest, because that's probably the best bang for your buck. What bothers me about that, on the flip side, is you're still beginning to learn the language of Amazon and not the language of anything else. And you're going to always be biased towards that. And I know it makes economic sense to do that. Just even if you're not exclusive, just to start with Amazon, figure it out, and then move wide. But again, that's such a prejudiced view, because they may not be the biggest player in every global market, especially if we start thinking beyond North America and maybe the UK. The other thing that I think, because I consult one-on-one with plenty of authors, and there are authors where it may make sense, at least temporarily, for the short-term gain. And game is exactly what it is, because with Amazon, you're always gaming the system. It's more gaming than it is actually worrying about the right customers getting your book. Although with ads, you are hopefully trying to find the right customers to get your book, but there's so much gaming going on. And I think that's one of the challenges. But if you only have one book, chances are you're not going to make a lot of money in Kindle Unlimited page reads, which is where the big money is when you're exclusive to Amazon. It's the authors with rapid release and the 10-book series and all of that, because if you have a 300-page book, average digital page count for a full-length novel, your book is going to have to get read thousands and thousands of times in order to actually make money. So it's often the people with those series that have that, which kind of expands that sort of prejudice where I'm going to start with Amazon and I'm going to rapid release for the first 3 years or the first 2 years of the 10, 15 book release. And then when I'm not making money on Amazon anymore, then I'm going to go wide as an afterthought. I get really angry about this. But I think I get angry about it because it demonstrates a lemming sort of mentality, which really bothers me because I know indie authors are supposed to be independently minded. They're supposed to be independently spirited. They're supposed to actually be in control, not following everyone else off the cliff. That 30-day Amazon cliff that everyone still talks so much about. So that's one of the challenges that I constantly butt up against, even in a society where people are thinking that they're wide. It frustrates me also to no end that the retailer with the dominant position is actually forcing authors, backing them into a corner to actually have to make that decision, which may be good for Amazon's customers, but it's not good for customers and readers in general everywhere. It's not good for people who frequent libraries. It's not good for authors, especially because that program also conditions authors that your book isn't really worth anything because they take that monthly fee that they pay to have access to Kindle Unlimited and they absorb it in terms of I'm just going to binge read, which I think ultimately devalues an author and their books, which is frustrating because we all want to make a living. Well, we don't all want to make a living, but I'm going to assume that a lot of writers out there would rather spend more of their time writing and storytelling than they would having to work a more traditional
Yeah.
9 to 5 career, right?
It does also seem that once you've trained readers to expect to be able to get your work just as part of what they're paying for Prime or whatever,
Hmm.
then it's not as if you can easily transfer them over to a different mindset, that you're not going to take those readers with you if you then remove yourself from being exclusive to Amazon and
Yeah.
continue writing in a series or continue writing other books. Do you see that panning out, what I'm describing?
Oh, for sure. I mean, let's take a parallel. Let's just think about Netflix in the last 5 years or so. Netflix is a place where you pay a monthly fee and it's all you can watch. It's like trying to somebody who's been trained and only streams on Netflix, and suddenly Netflix is, oh, this one you got to pay for. What do you mean? I'm paying $15 a month to use your service. Why do I have to pay for that movie? It's the same mentality. So from the
Yep.
customer's perspective, when somebody goes out of Kindle Unlimited, that customer's upset. And then Amazon's like the author, like they had a choice. No, in some cases, the author didn't have a choice. Now, again, and the going wisdom that I always tell authors is when I'm in Kindle Unlimited, thank you, dear reader. I love you so much. You're the best in the world. I love my readers, but I love all my readers. I don't just love my readers who are privileged to be able to pay a monthly fee to get access to Unlimited. I want all my readers to be able to get my books for free. And now that I'm published wide, all of my readers can get all of my books through the public library and they don't have to pay for that, right?
I think
Or
that that's,
they pay a
yeah,
lot less. Like, yeah, okay,
yes,
I know it comes out of taxes in a lot of cases and stuff like
right.
that, but it's a lot less, right? Than what you're
Yeah.
paying Amazon every month. I'm not paying it to a corporation, or I'm paying it for the good of the reading public. And that's a tough thing. I understand authors are backed into a corner, but there are ways to make sure that the readers can still, if they want, if they really like your stuff, you're not forcing them to pay. You're just asking them to be open to other opportunities outside of their Kindle.
Yep. And no library or bookstore is going to buy from Amazon. So that's important to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the risk of leading us a little bit away from the sticking to ebooks, I think it is important to just say that the decision you make for your print and the decision you make for your audio is separate than the decision you make for your ebook.
Yeah, you can decide one thing. You can be exclusive to Amazon on ebook, but not on print. You can be exclusive to ACX, Audible, owned by Amazon for audiobook, but not ebook or not print. So they're not dependent upon one another. You can pick and choose that, which is great. I love when authors have choice. I love when they leverage that choice too.
Right. So we had talked a little bit about why you would not recommend people make the intentional decision to go with KU. And then there is another sort of in between flavor, which is I'm getting started. I'm intimidated by all the different platforms. I'm just going to load my work onto KDP for Amazon, maybe not even check the exclusive one, but I'm going to get to the other ones later. But it sounds like that's dangerous too, because you're
Yeah.
setting a mindset for yourself of prejudicing yourself toward Amazon.
Yeah,
Talk
I
about that a
mean
little bit.
it's they're always the most favored retailer, and so you're immediately handing everything over to this one retailer as opposed to being wide. And I understand the challenge. And when you're first learning, it is really difficult. But if you develop the habit, it becomes part of your subconscious. And when it becomes part of your subconscious, you're not aware that you still have that prejudice, that you still have that. It's just normal. What's normal? You release a book to Amazon, and then if it doesn't do well, then it goes everywhere. If it's not good enough, it goes everywhere else. Like, did you see what that said?
Yeah.
Because if it's doing good, and I'm making lots of money on Amazon, I don't need those other losers. It goes back to the original Riverdale cartoons with Archie and Betty and Veronica. Archie was an ass, a complete ass, because Veronica is Amazon. And when Veronica wanted Archie, he was at her beck and call, left, right, and center. And then when Veronica's like, no, I'm off with Reggie because he has a better car than your jalopy and stuff like that. And Archie would go whining back to Betty, who would always take him in. It's like all these other retailers would always take that jackass in, treated her like crap.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not important, Betty, unless I have no one else. And I know I'm getting pretty animated and
You are.
angry about it, but
It's
that's
Mark
the
angry.
reality. Maybe because I was that guy in high school. It probably stems back to my own personal issues. I was the loser in high school who a girl would have this jock boyfriend or whatever who would treat her like crap. She'd come crawling over, shoulder to cry on. I was like, oh, why can't he be more like you? I'm more like me. How come I'm only good enough when he's dumped on you, when he's treated you like crap? When I realized that goes way back to a personal issue.
I know. We're having like
That's
a little
why I
therapy
get so
session
angry.
here.
Yeah, that's why I don't get angry at all about this. But again, Amazon's forcing authors into having to be Archie all the time. And honestly, oh my God, the yo-yo. I'm in and out and in and out. Like, the worst thing an author can do for their career and their readers is that, but actually even more so for their professional reputation. You got to remember, I worked at a retailer. I work with a distributor that works with all of the retailers, including Amazon. And just my own personal perspective, and I know that's only mine, that may not be everyone in the industry, but I have to wonder how many of the other people who don't work for Amazon actually wonder about the actual professionalism of anyone that they want to work with, who's not reliable, fickle, in and out like a yo-yo, not even consistent in their approach. Like, who can I rely on? Who can I depend on? Because I'll be honest with you, I have worked when I was both at Kobo and through Drafted Digital on getting authors into promotions, either at Kobo or through Kobo or other retailers. And after you do all this work and you get everything up and running, in the meantime, the author who requested that you get the promotion delists the book without even having the courtesy of saying, "Oh yeah, I'm exclusive to Kindle. Thanks for getting me the promo, but I don't care about you anymore." Veronica took me back in, right?
I think that's a really important perspective that not many people have the privilege of having, as you have, having worked at both Kobo and Drafted Digital, that it's not just the anonymous machine where you're pressing buttons. There are people on the other side, and that just as you're saying that those decisions you make about availability and non-availability of your books on those platforms really do have repercussions on your future ability to make use of those platforms.
It's like, and then they come back 6 months later because Amazon did something stupid to them or was goofier. They didn't get the sales that they wanted, and then you're like, do you remember that A2 Brute moment? Here's your knife. Oh, you want your knife back? Oh, okay. So you can stab me again? I'm being a little crass when I say that, but I've had that perception of authors who have completely abandoned the greener pastures, the wider pastures for that one single ranch. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to waste my time trying to help them anymore because I want to help authors who help themselves. And again, that's my personal Mark Leslie Lefebvre's bias. That is not the bias of any of the companies that I have worked for or work for or do work with. But I have to say, I'm being completely honest here. And people have feelings. Amazon doesn't have feelings. Because when you think about Amazon, you don't think about the people. You think about the algorithms and the machines and stuff like that. When you think about Apple, when you think about Kobo, when you think about Nook, and more so now with Google, you're thinking about the people because there's the people that are behind the decisions. There's the people that are out there in the author community and interacting with you and engaging with you. And I'm just asking authors to take a moment to remember, like you said, Maddie, there's people there and they have feelings. And that could either Karma can come and get you in a good way, or it can come and get you in a bad way, depending on your yo-yo behavior.
So I want to switch now to Wide for the Win with capital W's, because I
Oh,
think
yes.
this conversation about the community aspect of all this is a nice lead in,
Yeah.
that there is a group, a Wide for the Win developing group, an upcoming book and so on, of people who are, I'm imagining, of the same mindset that you are. So can
Well,
you
not
talk a
not
little bit
not as
about that?
radical as me.
Not as radical as you maybe, but maybe some more radical.
So yeah, this is Aaron Wright's brainchild. Aaron contacted me. I think it was shortly after reading Killing It on Kobo. Know the alliteration there. And the
Yes,
reason I wrote
nice.
Killing It on Kobo was because every bloody book out in the market was about Amazon this and Amazon that and Amazon the other thing and Amazon this and Amazon and Amazon. And it was nothing about any of the other retailers. There were a few. I think Patty Jansen had always taken a wide approach, and so she had some stuff that was on that, but very few books in the market and nothing specifically on any other retailers that were really valuable, that were bringing something new to the table. So I did that. And then Aaron reached out and said, hey, I want to do something like that, but for everyone. And this is what I'm looking at calling it. I'm going to start a group. And it's like, oh my God, hey, how can I help you? Like, Aaron, where have you been all my life? Let's do this. And so I was like a little cheerleader off to the side while she was building that up with Steph. And then I joined the group on Facebook. The group's now over 5,000 people. And one of the things I love about Aaron's attitude is Aaron really, and when you look at like her, like the top 10 things that you can do, it's about mindset. And Erin is probably a lot more gracious and a lot more polite at addressing it than I am, in terms of the way that she approaches the mindset. Like, don't just give away Kindle readers. They don't need the help, but all the other players do. I'm going to give away a Nook. I'm going to give away a Kobo. I'm going to give away an Apple device. Maybe I can give away an Android device to my readers, because it's these little subtle things. Well, yeah, well, everyone has a Kindle. No, I don't own a Kindle. I own a Kobo. Multiple Kobos, actually. I don't own a Nook. So I have Android and I have iOS devices, but I don't own a Kindle, nor have I ever owned a Kindle. I'm not going to say I never will. I do have a Kindle app on my phone that I've used. And so Erin was going to write the book, Wide for the Win. And she started the group as a way to support authors, because, again, the way I said there's no books on Kobo, she said there's no place where you can go where you're just going to assume you're going to make the assumption that everyone in this group is publishing wide. So there is no discussion of should I go wide or should I be exclusive to Amazon. That's moot.
Yeah.
Like, you want that discussion? Go have it in 50,000 other author groups. In the Wide for the Win group, you can't have that discussion. And ironically, I would argue there are still people having that discussion. They're just working their way around. Like, I want to have this discussion here. No, go talk about it in the other 50 groups. This place is just for wide strategies. And there's been a lot of amazing things shared in the group, because Aaron and Susie and moderators of the group are doing an amazing job of wrangling the cats and keeping us all together. But so many authors are sharing their stories, like Brian, on how they're doing on Google, or how they've used Nook, or how they've used Apple or Google Play or Kobo or any of those platforms, and sharing openly in a way that can really be beneficial. Aaron then was spending so much time helping other authors, writing the book and then rewriting the book and rewriting the book every time everything changed. She reached out to me and said, I don't think I'm going to ever finish this book. I have to abandon the project. And I was like, oh man, that's too bad. I was really looking forward to buying it and reading it, because she wanted to go back to writing the novels that her readers had gone a long time without seeing an update. And so I had, in the meantime, been working on the first book I started to write years ago when I left Kobo. And I wanted to share my 25, 30 years experience in the book industry. And it was called an Indy Publishing Insider Secrets. And 7 P's of Publishing Success was a chapter that kind of grew out of hand. Killing It on Kobo was another chapter that kind of grew out of hand. It became its own book. An Author's Guide to Working with the Bookstores and Libraries was another section of the book that just completely became its own book. But then I was still sitting there. And so I was still working on Indie Publishing Insider Secrets when Aaron said this. And then I reached out to her, I think a week later. I was thinking about it, and I went, hey, Aaron, so I've been working on this book already. And since you're not using the title, Wide for the Win, that's the mentality I'm approaching. Can I use the title? Because I'm going to rename the book I've been working on to that, because I think it matches, it's especially fit with my alliteration. And would you write the foreword for me? If I have your blessing. If not, I already have a title. I've got everything good to go. And so I've been working on my version of the book. And it's been an interesting experience because I had to abandon tactics and specifically this works now, because most of the this works now are gamifications of the systems. You can't avoid that even in the other retailers where it's humans, but understanding the humans is going to be universal. The way things work might change, but understanding the humans is universal. So with even conversations with Aaron and with Joanna Penn, I went and started to rewrite the book myself, and I was realizing I was falling into the same trap Aaron had fallen. Oh my God, Google changed this. Now I got to change this chapter again. I completely changed my approach, and the mindset to me is critical. Now, our good friends Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon, when you think about the three-story method and the way they describe, it's the foundation upon which you build your story.
Yep.
And that's the underlying thing. And so for me, I'm spending a significant amount of time on foundation, on mindset, and on all of these details that help lay the groundwork so that an author can then apply tactics and strategies from all over the place, particularly the ones that are shared on the Wide for the Win group. And there will be high-level stuff and specific examples from the author community with authors that were gracious enough to share. But yeah, I realized I couldn't just write a tactical book on publishing Wide. I had to write a mindset book.
Yep.
On Wide. And it's been an interesting journey so far. And I'm still, ironically, considering how many months I've been chipping away at this, I'm still probably only halfway there.
So you are bringing a great unique perspective, both because of your professional background, your profession, both as a bookseller, as an author, as a publisher, but you're using KU in some cases, correct? Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you're making the decision where it makes sense for you from a business point of view to go on the Kindle Unlimited route?
Yeah, it sounds like I'm a hypocrite when I get so, how dare you? But I was sitting in Kobo's office when the Kindle Unlimited program was announced, or actually when KDP Select was announced, because Kindle Unlimited didn't come along for a while, but there was still an exclusivity program where, oh yeah, you get 5 free days. Yay, good for you. Oh, you get countdown deals. And then it became page reads on top of that. But I published a book within 6 hours, exclusive, a project I'd been sitting on. I saw this announcement, and even though I work for a competitor, I'm an author as well. So I knew I needed to put a book into Kindle Unlimited because I needed to understand how it worked. So one of the things that I did when I was building Kobo Writing Life is I used as many of the platforms as I could. Nook wouldn't let me because I was Canadian. So back in the day, they wouldn't let you. They do now, but too little, too late. And so I used all of the various platforms and then took notes on what I liked, what I didn't like, what authors liked, but they didn't like, and built something. So when KDP Select came out, I published in it, and I've always had at least one book in the program. And one of the main reasons that I've always had at least one book in the program is the same mentality I tried to raise my son with, which is, don't tell me you don't like this vegetable if you've never tried this vegetable or this food. If you try the food and you don't like it, fine, but you can't not try something. And it's the same thing. I'm not going to poo-poo KDP Select unless I've tried it. That being said, I've launched books into KDP Select. I have kept books in KDP Select for years, multiple books. Never my whole catalog, ever, because that kind of goes against my religion. But I've always had books, and I've played the game, and I've done the gamification and stuff like that. So I can't help authors understand something, especially when I'm working one-on-one consultation, and some authors are exclusive. And if that's their plan, if that's their goal, I'm going to help them be the best they can at that. I'm going to tell them my unbiased opinion, but I'm going to still help them to the best of my ability. And because again, you never know if it's going to work for you unless you try it. And the other thing that I think on the flip side is, if you've never tried it, you're always going to wonder, and it's going to be the road less traveled, and it's going to be that date you never went on. And in your mind, you're going to imagine that this was a prince or Princess or whatever that was just, oh, it would have been so glorious had I just gone into Kindle Unlimited. So check it out, get in there, understand it from the inside, and then make a decision that's right for you, understanding what you're signing up for. I would also argue, I'm just going to say, I don't think you can legitimately call yourself an indie author. Indie is short for independent. If you are exclusive to Amazon, I would argue that you are a corporate author. I don't think you can proudly boast that you're an indie author if you're exclusive. So there, haha, I said it. I took my stand.
Yeah, it's a great point. And except for maybe some outlier cases, I don't think anyone is saying don't go to Amazon, because I
No,
think for any author, Amazon is always going to be a significant chunk of their business.
yeah.
Do you concur with that? Like,
No, I'm going to argue with you on this
okay,
because it's fun if we get into fisticuffs here.
yep,
Amazon is always going to be a part of your business. Amazon is not always going to be a significant chunk of your business. And that's one of the things that I think is critical.
yep.
Yeah, for many authors, Amazon is a significant part of their business, and they're terrified is what happens if that goes away. But I honestly think that Amazon will always be a part of the business. I honestly think print books will always be a part of the business too. I don't think they're ever going to go away, but it's dependency on a particular retailer. It's your dependency on a format as well. I think a lot of indie authors are dependent upon Amazon ebook sales, right? Like it's not just the wide in terms of retailer, but it's the format. And I would argue if Kobo is 90% of your sales or 75% of your sales, or Apple or Nook, I would argue that you need to consider being wide, because hey, I was at Kobo the day the lights went out for all indie authors, known as either Erotica Gate or Kobo Gate, depending on how much you hated Kobo at the time. But I was there when they turned the switch off on every single independent author title because of a few bad apples that were messing up. Like the whole water system was polluted, so they had to shut off, had to dry it all up.
And what year
Uh,
was that?
that was the end of 2013, Thanksgiving in Canada, 2013. A day I will never forget, not only because it was my 12th wedding anniversary, I was moving into a new house, and I spent 16 hours that day putting out fires related to that because WH Smith shut down all of their entire website because of this polluted system. And again, it was a few bad apples that messed it up for all the good indie authors anywhere. So if a retailer like Kobo that actually cares and actually invested in putting authors first, if they can shut off authors like that, anyone can.
Yeah, it's
So
like a
that's
stock
the
portfolio. You don't want to put all your money in
things.
one stock. You don't want to put all your books in one vendor
Exactly.
and rely on it too heavily.
I know Michael Tamblyn personally. I do not know Jeff Bezos. I know Jeff Bezos is a big book fan, right? They're both brilliant leaders who run these companies. And I know Jeff Bezos loves books, but I know Michael Tamblyn loves books, and I know Michael Tamblyn loves authors. I know this personally. And even then, he had to make the decision to shut things down. So what would a corporation where books are an afterthought in terms of their revenue, what would they do? Or anyone else? I love Apple and I love Google, but Apple and Google are not bookstores. Apple and Google are brilliant technology companies where they've got these really awesome book nerds who work in the book department. They're amazing people. I love them. I think they're great people. But again, they're part of this larger corporation. So somebody could come along and just decide we're not going to do books anymore as well. That's something that could happen. So again, I'm not anti-Amazon. I'm anti exclusivity, and I'm anti all eggs in one basket. And it just happens that Amazon tends to have the dominant basket for a lot of authors. Yeah.
So if people are intrigued by what you were saying about remember the human side on the other side of the computer screen, and I'm trying to frame this question up so it doesn't launch us into another entire episode unless you want to go there. But one of the things that I find stands in my way is knowing how to go about marketing on each of these different platforms. So for Kobo, I could go to Killing It on Kobo. For Google Play, evidently Brian Rathbone is the only person who knows what's going on there.
Yeah.
But Google Play is a really good example because I would love to make Google Play a much bigger part of my
Right.
income. But it's very hard to know where to go for that information. Do you have any advice generically or for
Yeah.
specific platforms, if that makes sense, about where people can go to take advantage of those other
I'm
platforms?
glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. You don't have to go to killing it on Kobo. Kobo Writing Life team has a podcast. They release episodes every week. You get insights by listening to them. They're very available. The Google team has been interacting. Apple has been doing some stuff through the 20 books to 50K group, through Drafted Digital, through other players. There are different players. Alessandra Torre has been doing free webinars on, this is Goodreads, but that's, again, thinking wide, thinking outside of just Amazon ads. And so if you're not familiar with Google, yeah, okay, Brian's great. Brian Rathbone's a great guy. He understands, he knows what's going on. But how much time have you actually spent looking at Google? How much time, if you have an Android device, or even you can have the Google app on an iOS device, how much time have you spent playing in the app as a browser, as a consumer? You probably spend the majority of your time looking at Amazon and looking at your ranking. Do you know if Google has ranking? Do you know if Apple has ranking or Kobo? I think a
Yeah.
lot of authors don't even look or spend time getting to understand it. So take the time to go and check out the platforms, see what they're merchandising, what they're merchandising, stuff that probably makes sense for them and their customers. That's understanding them. If you can listen to an interview with them on a podcast or their own podcast or whatever. Ingram Spark, Robin Cutler, when she was at Ingram, she started that Go Publish Yourself. That you're getting to hear from people who work at Ingram to understand, how does this print world work?
Yep.
I think that's critical. Take the time to apply this same amount, or at least a percentage, even if you apply 10% of the energy you put into understanding Amazon, you'll probably, by rote, you'll probably just do better, and pick one platform at a time. You can't do them all, right? It's hard. Just like, I'll start with Amazon, the world's biggest bookstore. Pick a retailer, understand it, play with it a little bit. So for example, I've done things where, like, I haven't done much on Google right now. For the next month, I'm going to try to focus and understand it a little bit more. I'm going to read a book on Google. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to try and find and shop for a book on Google, so I understand, how do people shop and buy books on Google? I can't yet. I'm surprised she hasn't talked to me, but I have Google Home, and I still can't go and buy audiobooks or ebooks through my Google Home. It's
Huh.
not a functionality, but you
Yeah.
can on the Alexa. So that's got to come into play relatively soon. But again, trying to understand how people shop, how people buy, how people read. And then if you can pick up on any of those interviews with any of those wonderful people from the various platforms. And obviously Apple doesn't do a lot of talks, so they have authors do the talks for them, authors who've been successful. They have lots of great stories to share about how it works. Because oftentimes Apple does have a policy of, don't reach out to us, we'll reach out to you. How do I get them to reach out to me? Sell hard. How do I sell hard? You got to understand Apple, right? So
Yeah.
it seems like a bit of a chicken and egg thing, but it can happen if you focus on it and you actually pay attention beyond the shores of the world's biggest river.
Well, Mark, I can't pass up having that as the wrap up for the conversation, because it was such a great close. So thank you again for being a three-peat guest. And please let the listeners know where they can go to find out more about you, your
Sure.
books, Wide for the Win, and anything else related to you online.
markleslie.ca. You can find everything from there.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Maddie.